My son's relationship drama turned into a family crisis. I never expected this. I introduced a girl to my son while he was in a situationship. Reddit drama family tales. At the age of 50, I find myself in the midst of a perplexing and somewhat distressing situation involving my son's girlfriend, who has consistently been somewhat distant and cool toward me. My son and his girlfriend, both 25, have been dating for a while now, but the roots of the issue go back about 3 years, to a time before they were officially a couple. Back then, my son was involved in what he described as a situationship with her. This term was new to me at the time, implying a relationship that was more than friendship, but without clear commitment. He lavished her with luxurious gifts and frequently invited her over. Yet, when pressed, he admitted that they weren't officially together. She was an attractive online influencer, considering her options among several interested parties. About 7 months into this undefined relationship, I met a young woman through my work who seemed particularly smitten with my son. It was during a typical bustling afternoon at my small boutique, a place adorned with colorful fabrics and eclectic decorations that reflected my personal taste for the vibrant and unusual, that I met her. One of my employees, recently hired, brought an infectious energy and a smile that could brighten even the dreariest days. As we arranged new stock one day, she casually mentioned her admiration for my son, having seen photos of him on my desk. Her interest piqued as she spoke of his achievements and hobbies, which I had shared in passing during our coffee breaks. My son was in what he called a situationship with an internet influencer, which is an informal and seemingly open arrangement, so I saw no problem with putting him in front of someone who was obviously interested. After all, the influencer was still weighing her options among several suitors, and he had previously made it clear that the connection was not exclusive. Given the circumstances, I believed that giving this young lady my son's contact information and urging her to give him a call was a harmless enough gesture. It could be fun for him to meet her. When I brought up the interaction with my son later, his response was hesitant, with a vague, "Okay, Mom," and a non-committal shrug. He immediately changed the subject. There was no quick follow-up or spark of interest. It appeared to be just one more thing tucked away in the recesses of his memory, not important enough to take action on just now. My son's response was non-committal, and nothing immediate came of it. However, eventually, he and the influencer formalized their relationship. Over the following months, the dynamics of his relationship with the influencer began to shift. Whether my introduction played any role in this change was unclear, but about 3 to 4 months later, he and the influencer decided to commit to each other officially. They started appearing together more publicly, and their social media was filled with coupled photos and sweet captions, clearly marking their relationship status for all to see. It was a transition from a loose, undefined connection to something more solid and acknowledged, which took me by surprise, given the casual nature of their earlier interactions. Wanting to clear the air and address any potential misunderstandings, I approached her during one of her visits to our home. I attempted an apology if my actions had seemed intrusive. Her response was forthright, suggesting I should have stayed out of my son's personal affairs, as the boundaries of their early relationship, though unclear to me, were set by them. This notion of variable boundaries in each situationship was a revelation to me, and clearly a point of contention. My daughter, seeing the tension, suggested somewhat flippantly that I seek advice via Reddit, a reflection of her frustration with the situation. The girlfriend's reaction to our conversation was not hopeful. She became even colder, which worries me, as my son is quite serious about their future together. The setting was our family living room, a space that usually felt cozy and inviting, with its soft, plush sofas, and the gentle hum of the grandfather clock in the corner. However, on that particular afternoon, the atmosphere felt tense and uncomfortably charged. It was just the two of us, as I had asked her to stay back for a few minutes after a family lunch, hoping to discuss our misunderstandings privately. I chose my words carefully, trying to convey my sincerity and regret if my past actions had overstepped her boundaries. The autumn light filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft patterns on the carpet, a stark contrast to the hardness of the conversation. As I spoke, I noticed her posture remained rigid, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. Her face, usually expressive and animated, was set in a mask of polite detachment. When she replied, her voice was cool and measured, her words carefully chosen to maintain a diplomatic but distant tone. She reminded me that the dynamics of her relationship with my son, even in its early stages, were for them to navigate and not for outsiders to interfere with. Her response left little room for the warmth or understanding I had hoped to foster. It was clear that my attempt at an apology hadn't thawed the frost between us. After a brief and somewhat stilted conversation, she excused herself, claiming a need to catch up on work. The way she quickly gathered her things and avoided eye contact as she left underscored the chilly atmosphere. Watching her leave, I felt a sinking feeling of unease. My son is deeply in love with her, often discussing their plans for the future with bright enthusiasm. His seriousness about their relationship made her coldness toward me all the more troubling. It was clear that repairing this rift would require more than just a single conversation, and the path forward seemed daunting. As I sat alone in the now silent room, pondering my next steps, adding to the complexity was that I'd had limited interactions with her. One significant episode did little to help our relationship. When she decided to drop out of college to pursue her career as an online influencer full-time, I expressed my concerns bluntly. She was close to completing her degree, and I saw her decision as potentially short-sighted. I voiced these thoughts more forcefully than I perhaps should have, especially considering I wasn't contributing financially to her education. Now, reflecting on these events, I find myself questioning how best to mend this fractured relationship. My approach so far has evidently not been effective, and with my son's deepening commitment to her, the need to reconcile for the sake of family harmony feels urgent. I am contemplating ways to bridge this gap, seeking to understand her perspective more fully, and to communicate my intentions without overstepping boundaries. It's a delicate balance to strike, one that I hope with time and effort can be achieved. Update: I wasn't planning to share more at this point, preferring instead to keep things simple and civil. However, events took a turn that forced the issue out into the open. My daughter felt compelled to share our family troubles with my husband, perhaps hoping for a resolution that seemed beyond my reach. My husband, typically a steady presence, though often absent due to his work, is deeply invested in the well-being of our family. His career has enabled us to live more comfortably than many in our community, but it comes with the cost of his frequent absence. This time, he returned unexpectedly early and walked into the midst of unresolved tension. Unhappy with what he perceived as ongoing issues with our son, he made the drastic decision to ask him to leave our home, a course of action I hadn't anticipated and wasn't prepared for. I wasn't there when he arrived. I only came back to find that my son had already packed some essentials and left. The reality of seeing his space empty brought an ache, a deep, unsettling feeling that things were spiraling out of my control. Meanwhile, my son's messages filled my phone. His words echoed his hurt and disbelief at being cast out, describing our actions as heartless. With my husband leaving town again the following day, the responsibility to manage the fallout and maintain our home fell heavily on my shoulders. He assured me that he would handle things concerning our son from afar, a statement that left me both relieved and distressed. How could we bridge such a significant rift with distance between us? My daughter, aligning with her father, showed little sympathy for her brother. Her reactions have been fierce, further straining the delicate threads holding us together. Whenever my son has attempted to return home to talk, their interactions have escalated quickly into shouting matches, leaving no room for the calm discussion we so desperately need. In our home, where warmth and laughter once permeated the air, a heavy tension had settled, thick and unyielding. My daughter had taken a firm stance alongside her father, reflecting his decision with unwavering support that bordered on harshness toward her brother. Her loyalty, while admirable in some contexts, added layers of complexity to our current familial strife. Now, every attempt at communication seemed to devolve into conflict. On one such occasion, my son, hopeful for reconciliation, knocked softly at the front door. His eyes searched for any sign of welcome. As I opened the door, the hopeful glimmer in his eyes faded almost instantly when he saw his sister standing behind me. Her stance rigid, her expression stony. Before a word could be spoken, the air thickened with unspoken accusations and defenses. My son, usually reserved, began with a tentative, "Can we talk?" aiming to bridge the chasm that had formed between him and the family. However, his sister, interpreting his return as defiance, responded sharply, "Why are you here? You know Dad's decision." The conversation quickly escalated as voices rose. My daughter, mirroring her father's earlier decisiveness, accused her brother of being thoughtless and irresponsible. Their arguments, fueled by past misunderstandings, resonated within the walls, each word echoing louder than the last.